I drove 9 hours straight from Washington, D.C. to Atlanta, arriving unannounced at the supposedly five-star assisted living facility my mother had chosen for my grandmother. I expected to walk into a luxury suite and surprise the woman who raised me. Instead, I found her abandoned in a dark, stifling room, wearing a soiled paper gown, staring blankly at a sealed window. I stood there trembling with rage, knowing my mother and sister were currently sipping margaritas in Cabo San Lucas on a vacation funded entirely by my grandmother's pension. When I finally cornered a nurse, she grabbed my hand with wide, terrified eyes and whispered that they thought my grandmother had no family left. My name is Maya. I am 35 years old and a forensic accountant. Before I tell you exactly how I dismantled my family's stolen empire down to the very studs, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to walk away from toxic relatives to protect your peace. The lobby of Oak Grove Estates smelled of fresh lilies and expensive floor wax. It was masterfully designed to make guilty children feel better about dropping off their parents and never coming back. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceilings, and a pianist played soft classical music in the corner of the polished marble foyer. I had driven all night, leaving my apartment the moment a terrible gut feeling settled in my stomach. My mother Valerie had held power of attorney for 8 months, insisting she needed full control of Nana Josephine's finances to secure her a spot in this exclusive facility. Valerie told me to focus on my accounting firm and let her handle the family business. I dropped my overnight bag right at the pristine mahogany front desk, completely ignoring the receptionist who called after me, demanding I sign the visitor log. I already knew the room number from the glossy brochure Valerie had texted me months ago to prove how well she was handling things. Room 4B was supposed to be a corner suite in the premium wing overlooking the courtyard. I pushed through the heavy double doors of the residential wing, and the illusion of luxury vanished instantly. The carpet here was stained and worn thin. The air felt heavy, thick with the oppressive heat of poor ventilation and the sharp, unmistakable stench of ammonia. It hit my lungs like a physical punch. I found room 4B at the very end of a dim, fluorescent-lit hallway far away from the piano music and the fresh lilies. It was not a premium corner suite. It was a cramped Medicaid overflow room, barely large enough to fit a single twin bed and a rusted metal chair. My 82-year-old grandmother sat in a battered wheelchair facing a window painted shut with thick layers of cheap white gloss. She was not wearing the soft cashmere sweaters or the tailored slacks she had worn her entire life as a proud and respected federal judge. She was draped in a thin, ripped paper hospital gown. The gown was soiled. Her skin looked dangerously ashen, and her beautiful silver hair was matted to her scalp. She was shivering despite the suffocating heat in the small room. My vision blurred with hot tears, but my grief instantly crystallized into pure, unadulterated rage. I pulled out my phone and hit FaceTime. It rang 4 times before Valerie answered, the screen filled with brilliant Mexican sunshine, azure blue water, and the loud thumping bass of a luxury beach club. Valerie was wearing designer sunglasses and holding an oversized margarita garnished with fresh fruit. Maya, what do you want? Valerie sighed loudly, adjusting her wide-brimmed sun hat. You are completely ruining my vacation vibe right now. Kendra and Todd just went down to the private cabana to order more drinks, and I am trying to relax before my massage. I did not raise my voice. I kept it dangerously low, letting the absolute fury bleed into every syllable. Where do you think your mother is right now, Valerie? What kind of stupid question is that? Valerie scoffed, taking a long sip of her drink. She is in Atlanta, getting round-the-clock premium care that I arranged. Care that costs a fortune, by the way. You should be thanking me instead of calling to harass me on my 1 week of peace. I did not argue. I simply flipped the camera on my phone and pointed it directly at the fragile, shivering woman sitting in her own filth in a dark room. Look at your mother, I demanded, holding the phone steady. Look at what your $8,000 a month premium care actually buys. Look at the paper gown she is wearing while you buy rounds of drinks for Kendra and her useless white husband. Valerie saw the screen and her jaw tightened, but she did not look horrified. She looked deeply annoyed at being caught. She let out an exasperated breath and waved her manicured hand dismissively at the camera. She has severe dementia, Maya. She does not know the difference between a luxury suite and a standard room. You are being completely dramatic and hysterical as usual. Do not call me again until you calm down and learn some respect. The screen went black. She hung up on me. My own mother looked at the woman who had given her life rotting in a paper gown and simply ended the call. I shoved the device into my pocket and moved toward the cheap plastic dresser in the corner, desperately yanking drawers open to find a clean towel, a blanket, a fresh set of clothes. Every single drawer was completely empty. There was nothing, not a single personal item belonging to the woman who had built our entire family legacy from the ground up. The door creaked open behind me. An African-American nurse wearing faded blue scrubs stepped into the room holding a small plastic cup of water. Her name tag read, LaToya. She saw me standing there with my hands gripping the empty dresser and froze completely. The plastic cup shook in her hand, water spilling over the edges onto the dirty linoleum floor. "Who are you?" the nurse asked, her voice trembling as she backed toward the door. "You are not supposed to be in this wing without an escort." I turned around slowly, locking eyes with her. "I am her granddaughter," I said, stepping forward. "And you are going to explain to me right now why my family is supposedly paying $8,000 a month for a premium care package, while my grandmother sits in a soiled paper gown in a room that smells like a neglected kennel. Are you out of your mind? I am a forensic accountant, and I promise you I will tear through this facility's financial records and report you to every state board in Georgia by noon today." The nurse stepped back, her face draining of color. She looked from my furious expression to the frail figure in the wheelchair, and back to me. She dropped the plastic cup entirely. It clattered against the floor, splashing water across our shoes. "You are her granddaughter," she gasped, bringing a shaking hand to her mouth. She took another step back, her eyes darting nervously toward the hallway, before she rushed forward and grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "We have been trying to reach a woman named Valerie for 3 solid months," LaToya whispered, her voice cracking with panic. "All the emergency contact numbers were completely disconnected. The credit cards on file declined repeatedly. The facility director moved Josephine to this overflow unit because her account is in severe arrears. Every single check bounced. We honestly thought Josephine had no family left." I stared at LaToya, trying to process the absolute absurdity of her words. Bounced checks, disconnected numbers. My grandmother was a retired federal judge who received a massive pension every single month. There was absolutely no mathematical way her accounts could be in arrears unless someone was actively bleeding them dry. The pieces of a very dark puzzle began snapping into place inside my mind. Todd had launched a tech startup 2 years ago that miraculously stayed afloat despite having 0 actual clients. Kendra drove a brand new luxury SUV and constantly posted photos of her lavish shopping sprees in Buckhead. Valerie had completely remodeled her kitchen and was currently paying for a premium cabana in Cabo. They were not just neglecting Nana. They were actively siphoning her entire life savings to fund their ridiculous lifestyles while leaving her to die in squalor. I looked back at my grandmother. She was staring at the wall, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. The woman who had paid for my college tuition, the woman who had taught me how to read balance sheets, the woman who had been the pillar of our community, was sitting here stripped of her dignity because of my mother's greed. A cold, calculating calm washed over me. I did not want to yell anymore. Yelling was what powerless people did when they had no other options. I had options. I had a decade of experience tracking illicit funds for federal agencies and a burning desire to see my mother and sister face absolute ruin. LaToya was still holding my arm, waiting for my response. I gently pulled my arm away and looked the nurse dead in the eye. "I need you to listen to me very carefully, LaToya," I said, keeping my voice perfectly steady. "I am going to walk out of this room and go straight to your director's office. I am going to demand the complete unedited billing file for Josephine. If anyone tries to stop me, I will call the police and file formal elder abuse charges against this entire establishment. Latoya nodded rapidly, her eyes wide with understanding. They keep the downgrade authorization forms in the secondary file, she whispered quickly, looking over her shoulder again. You need to ask for the secondary file. The director signed off on moving her here the minute the payments stopped clearing. I squeezed her hand, acknowledging the risk she was taking by giving me this information. Thank you, I said simply. Now go find my grandmother a real blanket. She is freezing. I leave Latoya holding the plastic cup and stride down the long, sterile corridor. The fake floral scent of the main lobby hits me again as I push through the double doors. I do not stop at the front desk. I walk straight past the receptionist who shouts something about appointments and push open the frosted glass door marked Facility Director. Arthur Pendleton is sitting behind a massive oak desk playing solitaire on his computer. He jumps up, his face flushing red as I slam my leather portfolio down right over his keyboard. I am Maya Davis. I state, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. Josephine Davis is my grandmother. I want her complete billing history, the medical downgrade authorization, and the secondary file. Right now. Pendleton stammers, attempting to pull rank. He tells me I cannot just barge into a private office and demand confidential patient records. He says I am not the designated power of attorney. I flip open my portfolio and slide my federal forensic accounting license across the polished wood. I lean over the desk, getting inches from his face. I tell him I track wire fraud for the federal government. I tell him I already know about the bounced checks and the secondary file. I give him exactly 10 seconds to pull up the records before I call the state licensing board and report Oak Grove Estates for systemic elder neglect and financial complicity. His bravado crumbles instantly. His hands shake as he types his password into the system. The printer hums to life in the corner of his office. He hands me a thick stack of papers, wiping sweat from his forehead. He defensively states that they tried to reach my mother for months, but had to transfer Josephine to the Medicaid wing when the primary accounts ran dry. He claims his hands were tied. I ignore his excuses and start flipping through the ledger. The numbers jump out at me, painting a grotesque picture of pure greed. For the first 2 years of Nana's stay, the $8,000 premium care package was paid in full on the first of every month directly from her retired federal judge pension trust. Then exactly 8 months ago, the payment stopped. I find the specific document I am looking for, the care downgrade authorization form. It stripped Nana of her private room, her physical therapy, her specialized diet, and her round-the-clock monitoring. I look at the bottom of the page. There is my mother Valerie's signature, bold and unapologetic. But right next to it is a secondary financial guarantor signature. Todd Sterling, my brother-in-law. A bitter laugh escapes my throat. Todd is a man who wears Vineyard Vines polos and loves to lecture me at Thanksgiving about bootstraps and financial literacy. Todd is the wealthy white savior who married my sister Kendra and constantly acts like he rescued our black family from obscurity. He always speaks to me with that condescending, slow cadence, as if my career as an accountant is just a cute little hobby compared to his Silicon Valley tech startup. The pieces slam together in my mind with sickening clarity. Todd's tech startup has not secured a single legitimate client in 2 years. I remember Kendra complaining at Christmas that their venture capital funding had dried up. Yet somehow, Kendra just bought a brand new luxury SUV, and Todd has been expanding his executive team. They needed a massive injection of liquid cash to keep the illusion of their wealth alive. They did not just mismanage Nana's money, they actively rerouted her federal pension and completely drained her trust fund to float Todd's failing shell of a company. My mother authorized it. She sold her own mother's dignity so she could keep taking luxury vacations to Cabo and brag to her church friends about her successful son-in-law. I look up from the papers. The director is watching me, nervously adjusting his tie. I tell him I am taking my grandmother out of this facility immediately. Pendleton shakes his head frantically. He stands up and puffs out his chest, trying to regain some semblance of authority. He tells me I absolutely cannot do that. He says Valerie has sole legal and medical power of attorney. Removing a patient without the authorization of the POA is a federal offense. You try to take her out of this building and I will call the police. He threatens, his voice rising. I will have you arrested for elder abduction. You have no legal standing here, Miss Davis. I am protecting my facility from liability. I slowly place the papers back into my portfolio. I do not raise my voice. I do not break eye contact. I reach into my pocket and pull out my phone, tapping the screen until the dial pad is open. I slide the phone across the oak desk until it rests right in front of his hand. Call them. I say, my voice dead calm. I want you to call the Atlanta Police Department right now. I dare you. I dare you to stand in front of a police officer and explain exactly why a retired federal judge has stage 2 bed sores on her back, under your direct supervision. I dare you to explain to the state medical board why you allowed a legally vulnerable woman to rot in an unventilated overflow closet, covered in her own urine, while her family routed her pension to a tech startup. Pendleton stares at the phone, his face drains of all color. He knows exactly what an investigation would uncover. He knows a federal judge's mistreatment would trigger a media firestorm that would get this place shut down and his license permanently revoked. Call them, I repeat, leaning closer. Let us see who goes to jail today, Arthur. You for criminal medical neglect, or me for taking my grandmother to a hospital? He swallows hard. He slowly pushes my phone back across the desk. He refuses to look me in the eye. He mumbles that he will have the staff prepare her discharge paperwork, but insists I am taking full legal liability for the transfer. I snatch my phone off the desk. I tell him to keep his paperwork. I am not signing a single document that validates this facility. I turn on my heel and march out of his office, leaving the door wide open behind me. The fire in my chest is burning hotter now. This is no longer just a rescue mission. It is an active war. Todd and Valerie thought they could bleed my grandmother dry and leave her in the shadows because they assumed I was too busy or too weak to intervene. They relied on the fact that they had spent my entire life casting me as the bitter, isolated scapegoat, while Kendra played the golden child. They severely miscalculated. I head straight back to the residential wing, ready to get my grandmother out of this hellhole. I gripped the silver flash drive tightly as LaToya stepped back into the shadows of the facility. I put the SUV in drive and did not look back. The 9-hour journey to Washington, D.C. was a blur of highway lines and a burning desire for justice. I glanced over at Nana, sleeping fitfully in the passenger seat, wrapped securely in my camel cashmere coat. She looked so small, so fragile, completely stripped of the fierce dignity she had carried for 8 decades as a federal judge. I made a silent promise to her right then and there. I was going to dismantle their stolen lives piece by piece. We arrived at my high-rise condominium in the heart of D.C., just as the sun was coming up. I immediately contacted a premium private nursing agency I had vetted during the drive, and within 2 hours, a registered nurse named Sarah was setting up a comfortable, proper medical station in my guest suite. Nana was finally bathed, fed, and resting on a high-end orthopedial mattress. I needed to pick up a list of specialized prescriptions Sarah had ordered, so I walked 2 blocks down to the local pharmacy. I stood at the register, handing the pharmacist my debit card to cover the $400 bill. The machine beeped a harsh red declined message. I frowned and tried it again. Another decline. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. A bright red banner flashed across the top of my screen, indicating my account was locked due to a fraud report filed by the secondary account holder. It was my childhood checking account, the one my mother Valerie had opened for me when I was 14. She still had custodial access to it. A text message vibrated on my screen. It was from my sister Kendra. The text read that they knew I took Josephine and that Mom just froze my bank account. Kendra added a laughing emoji, calling me a broke spinster who could not even afford a decent lawyer, let alone premium medical care. She told me to bring Nana back before they had me arrested for elder abduction. I actually laughed out loud right there in the pharmacy aisle. They were so predictable. They still saw me as the powerless college student they used to walk all over. I reached into my wallet and pulled out my heavy metal black American Express card, handing it to the pharmacist. The transaction approved instantly. I typed my reply to Kendra as I walked out of the store with the medication. I told her she just froze a legacy checking account that had exactly $200 in it. I reminded her I was no longer the defenseless 20-year-old scapegoat she and Valerie framed for stealing Mom's diamond jewelry 10 years ago just so Kendra could pawn it for a designer handbag. I hit send and blocked her number. When I returned to the condo, Sarah was packing up her day bag. She told me Nana was awake and asking for me. I walked into the guest room and sat on the edge of the bed, taking her frail hand in mine. Her eyes were clearer than they had been in Atlanta. She looked around the bright, spacious room and then looked at me. Nana squeezed my wrist with a sudden, shocking amount of strength. Her voice was raspy, but her mind was completely lucid in that moment. She whispered that they did not know about the safety deposit box in Chicago. She pulled me closer, her eyes wide and urgent. She told me not to let the white boy find the blue key. I froze. The white boy meant Todd. I asked her where the key was. She told me to look inside her old leather-bound Bible. I rushed to the bag of belongings I had managed to grab from her house months ago before Valerie moved her to the facility. I flipped through the fragile pages of the Bible, and there, taped to the inside of the back cover, was a small metallic blue key with a banking serial number engraved on it. I did not waste a single second. I left Nana in Sarah's capable hands, booked a first-class ticket out of Reagan National, and was on a flight to Chicago by noon. Once the plane reached cruising altitude, I pulled out my laptop and plugged in the silver flash drive LaToya had given me. It was time for a financial autopsy. The unedited internal billing logs from the care facility were just the surface. What I found buried in the routing numbers of Todd's wire transfers was a masterclass in corporate theft. Using my forensic accounting software, I traced the pension funds. Todd had set up a web of phantom LLCs under his tech startup umbrella. The startup itself was a complete shell. They had zero legitimate clients and produced absolutely no software. Instead, every single dollar of Nana's $8,000 a month pension was being routed through a dummy vendor account labeled as consulting fees. That money was paying for Kendra's luxury car leases, Valerie's endless tropical vacations, and Todd's country club memberships. My phone buzzed with an in-flight Wi-Fi message. It was Todd. He had bypassed my block on Kendra's phone by using his own. His message was dripping with his usual condescending arrogance. He called me an angry black woman, trying to make a scene to get attention. He threatened to have his corporate lawyers sue me into bankruptcy for defamation if I did not return his wife's grandmother immediately. I cracked my knuckles, hovering my fingers over the keyboard. I decided to give him a tiny preview of his impending destruction. I replied outlining the exact corporate structuring flaw he made when he registered the fake vendor LLC in Delaware without obscuring the parent company's tax identification number. I reminded him that while he was busy playing golf with amateur investors, I had spent the last 10 years tracking illicit offshore funds for the federal government. I told him his lawyers were going to need lawyers. The plane landed in Chicago, and I took a black car straight to the downtown bank branch listed on the blue key. I presented my identification along with the emergency legal documents I had prepared. The bank manager escorted me to the vault. I turned the blue key in the lock and pulled out the heavy metal box. I expected to find vintage jewelry or maybe some emergency cash. Instead, I found a thick manila envelope sealed with wax. I broke the seal and pulled out the documents. They were original, unencumbered deeds. My grandfather had quietly purchased an entire block of commercial real estate in downtown Atlanta 30 years ago and placed it solely in Nana's name. It was worth millions. Todd and Valerie had been tearing the family apart looking for these exact documents because without the original deeds, they could not leverage the property. I flew back to D.C. that same evening, securing the deeds in my own fireproof safe. The next morning, I was sitting at my kitchen island analyzing the rest of the flash drive data when the intercom buzzed. It was the lobby concierge sounding incredibly stressed. He told me 3 people had forced their way past the front desk and jumped into the resident elevator before security could stop them. 10 seconds later, heavy fists pounded on my front door. Before I could even stand up, the door burst open. Valerie, Kendra, and Todd barged into my home like they owned the place. Todd marched straight into my kitchen and threw a thick legal document onto the marble island. He loudly declared it was a formal cease and desist order. He smugly announced he was taking his wife's grandmother back to Georgia right now, and that I had zero legal standing to stop him. Valerie immediately started her theatrical performance. She collapsed against the doorway, sobbing hysterically. She screamed that I was mentally unstable, that I was holding her mother hostage out of pure jealousy because I could never find a husband or build a perfect life like Kendra. She wailed that I was a bitter woman trying to destroy a loving family. I did not raise my voice. I did not move from my bar stool. I simply picked up my coffee mug and pointed my manicured finger toward the top corner of the ceiling. I told Todd to smile for the security cameras. I informed him that he had just forced his way into a secure building and committed criminal trespassing. I watched his smug expression falter for a fraction of a second as he glanced up at the blinking red light of my security system. But his arrogance quickly returned. He waved Valerie's power of attorney in my face, laughing. He told me the cameras did not matter because the POA gave them absolute legal authority over Josephine and her location. The door to my guest room clicked open. Elias, a ruthless top-tier trust attorney I had retained the moment I landed back in D.C., stepped out into the hallway. He was adjusting his expensive suit jacket and holding a freshly notarized stack of papers. Elias smiled a sharp, predatory smile. He informed Todd that actually Josephine had undergone a full independent psychiatric evaluation by a court-appointed doctor at 9 o'clock this morning. He handed Todd the top sheet of paper. Elias stated that Josephine was found of perfectly sound mind, and she formally revoked Valerie's power of attorney effective immediately. Valerie stopped crying instantly, her face draining of color. Kendra grabbed Todd's arm, her eyes wide with sudden panic. Elias took a step closer to them, his voice echoing loudly in the quiet condo. He added that Josephine did not just revoke the POA, she had officially retained his firm to execute a full forensic audit of her entire estate. He looked Todd up and down with utter disgust and told them they had exactly 3 minutes to vacate the premises before he had the federal marshals arrest them for trespassing. The adrenaline carried me across state lines, pushing back the exhaustion of the 9-hour drive. The sun was just cresting over the Potomac River by the time my rented SUV pulled into the underground parking garage of my high-rise condominium in downtown Washington. I did not waste a single second. I immediately called a premium private nursing agency I had vetted during a brief gas station stop in North Carolina. By the time I had Nana bathed, dressed in my softest silk pajamas and resting on the orthopedic mattress in my guest suite, a registered nurse named Sarah was knocking on my door. Sarah set up a proper medical station within minutes, her professional efficiency a stark contrast to the nightmare we had just left behind. She handed me a list of specialized prescription creams and antibiotics needed to treat the stage 2 bed sores Valerie had allowed to fester. I walked 2 blocks down to the local luxury pharmacy, the crisp morning air doing little to cool the absolute fury burning in my chest. I stood at the register and handed the pharmacist my debit card to cover the $400 total. The machine emitted a harsh red declined beep. I frowned, assuming it was a chip error, and inserted it a second time. Declined again. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. A bright red banner flashed across the top of my screen, indicating my account was locked due to a fraud report filed by the secondary account holder. It hit me instantly. It was my childhood checking account, the one Valerie had opened for me when I was 14. She still had custodial access to it. A text message vibrated on my screen. It was from Kendra. She gloated that they knew I took Nana and that Mom had just frozen my bank account. She added a laughing emoji calling me a broke spinster who could not even afford a decent lawyer, let alone premium medical care. She demanded I bring Nana back before Todd had me arrested for elder abduction. I actually laughed out loud right there in the pharmacy aisle. They were so incredibly predictable. They still saw me as the powerless college student they used to walk all over the easy target they could bully into submission. I reached into my wallet, bypassed the debit cards entirely, and pulled out my heavy metal black American Express card. I handed it to the pharmacist, and the transaction was approved in 2 seconds. I typed my reply to Kendra as I walked out of the store with a heavy bag of medication. I told her she just froze a legacy checking account that had exactly $200 in it. I reminded her I was no longer the defenseless 20-year-old scapegoat she and Valerie framed for stealing Mom's diamond tennis bracelet 10 years ago, just so Kendra could pawn it for a designer handbag. I hit send and immediately blocked her number. When I returned to the condo, I relieved Sarah for a moment to feed Nana some warm broth. Nana had not spoken a lucid word in 8 months, and the facility director had sworn her dementia was terminal. But as I lifted the spoon to her mouth, Nana suddenly gripped my wrist. Her grip was shockingly strong, and her eyes were crystal clear, piercing straight through the fog of neglect. "Baby," she whispered, her voice raspy but completely steady. "They do not know about the safety deposit box in Chicago. Do not let the white boy find the blue key." I froze, the silver spoon trembling in my hand. The white boy. She meant Todd. I gently set the bowl down on the nightstand and asked her exactly where the key was hidden. She told me to look inside the lining of her old leather-bound Bible. I rushed to the single duffel bag of belongings I had managed to salvage from her house months ago before Valerie changed the locks. I ran my fingers along the fragile spine of the Bible, feeling for anomalies. There, taped securely inside a split in the back cover, was a small metallic blue key engraved with a banking serial number. I did not hesitate. I left Nana in Sarah's highly capable hands, booked a first-class ticket out of Reagan National, and boarded a flight to Chicago by noon. Once the plane reached cruising altitude, I pulled out my laptop and plugged in the silver flash drive Latoya had slipped me. It was time for a financial autopsy. The unedited internal billing logs from the care facility were merely the surface. What I found buried in the routing numbers of Todd's wire transfers was a masterclass in corporate theft. Using my forensic accounting software, I traced the pension funds through a labyrinth of phantom LLCs set up under Todd's tech startup umbrella. The startup itself was a complete shell. They had zero legitimate clients and produced absolutely no software. Instead, every single dollar of Nana's $8,000 a month pension was being routed through a dummy vendor account categorized as consulting fees. That money was actively paying for Kendra's luxury car leases, Valerie's endless tropical vacations, and Todd's exclusive country club memberships. My phone buzzed with an in-flight Wi-Fi message. It was Todd. He had bypassed my block on Kendra's phone by using his own number. His message dripped with his usual condescending arrogance. He called me an angry black woman making a scene for attention and gave me 24 hours to return his wife's grandmother before his corporate lawyers sued me into bankruptcy for defamation. I cracked my knuckles, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I decided to give him a microscopic preview of his impending destruction. I replied, outlining the exact corporate structuring flaw he made when he registered the fake vendor LLC in Delaware without obscuring the parent company's tax identification number. I typed that while he was busy playing golf with amateur investors, I had spent the last 10 years tracking illicit offshore funds for the federal government. I told him his lawyers were going to need lawyers. The plane landed at O'Hare, and I took a black car straight to the downtown bank branch listed on the blue key. I presented my identification along with the emergency legal documents I had prepared during the flight. The bank manager escorted me into the silent steel-lined vault. I turned the blue key in the lock and pulled out the heavy metal box, expecting to find vintage jewelry, maybe some emergency cash reserves or old stock certificates. Instead, I found a thick manila envelope sealed with wax. I broke the seal and slid out the documents. They were original, unencumbered deeds. My grandfather had quietly purchased an entire block of commercial real estate in downtown Atlanta 30 years ago and placed it solely in Nana's name. It was worth millions. Todd and Valerie had been tearing the family apart, looking for these exact documents, because without the original deeds, they could not leverage the property for their massive fraudulent debts. I flew back to D.C. that same evening, securing the deeds in my own fireproof safe the moment I walked through my door. The next morning, I was sitting at my kitchen island, analyzing the final batches of the flash drive data, when the intercom buzzed. It was the lobby concierge sounding incredibly stressed. He told me 3 people had just forced their way past the front desk, threatening to call the police, and jumped into the resident elevator before security could stop them. 10 seconds later, heavy fists pounded on my front door. Before I could even stand up, the door burst open. Valerie, Kendra, and Todd barged into my home like they owned the place. Todd marched straight into my kitchen and threw a thick legal document onto the marble island. He loudly declared it was a formal cease and desist order. He smugly announced he was taking his wife's grandmother back to Georgia right now, and that I had zero legal standing to stop him. Valerie immediately started her theatrical performance. She collapsed against the doorway, sobbing hysterically. She screamed that I was mentally unstable, that I was holding her mother hostage out of pure jealousy because I could never find a husband or build a perfect life like Kendra. She wailed that I was a bitter woman trying to destroy a loving family. I did not raise my voice. I did not move from my bar stool. I simply picked up my coffee mug and pointed my manicured finger toward the top corner of the ceiling. I told Todd to smile for the security cameras, keeping my voice dead calm as I informed him he had just committed criminal trespassing in a secure federal building. I watched his smug expression falter for a fraction of a second as he glanced up at the blinking red light of my security system. But his arrogance quickly returned. He waved Valerie's power of attorney in my face, laughing as he told me the cameras did not matter because the POA gave them absolute legal authority over Josephine and her location. The heavy oak door to my guest room clicked open. Elias, a ruthless top-tier trust attorney I had retained the moment I landed back in D.C., stepped out into the hallway. He was adjusting his expensive suit jacket and holding a freshly notarized stack of papers. Elias smiled a sharp, predatory smile. He informed Todd that actually Josephine underwent a full independent psychiatric evaluation by a court-appointed doctor at 9 o'clock this morning. He handed Todd the top sheet of paper stating that Josephine was found to be of perfectly sound mind, and she had formally revoked Valerie's power of attorney, effective immediately. Valerie stopped crying instantly, her face draining of all color. Kendra grabbed Todd's arm, her eyes wide with sudden panic. Elias took a step closer to them, his voice echoing loudly in the quiet condo. He added that Josephine did not just revoke the POA. She had officially retained his firm to execute a full forensic audit of her entire estate. He looked Todd up and down with utter disgust and told them they had exactly 3 minutes to vacate the premises before he had the federal marshals arrest them for trespassing. Todd lets out a sharp, barking laugh that echoes against the high ceilings of my condo. He steps right up to Elias, attempting to use his physical size to intimidate the attorney. He points a manicured finger at Elias and then at me, declaring that a revoked power of attorney does not erase the legally binding investment contracts Josephine supposedly signed. He claims his startup is a primary creditor and that he has every right to recoup his massive losses by liquidating her remaining assets to cover the facility bills I supposedly interrupted. I walk slowly around the marble kitchen island, my heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. I tell Todd he is severely underestimating the amount of damage I can do with a single laptop and a Wi-Fi connection. I reach over and spin my MacBook around so the screen faces him directly. The spreadsheet on the display is a massive color-coded web of illicit transactions, red flags, and highlighted routing numbers. I look him dead in the eye and tell him exactly what I was doing while he and Valerie were sipping expensive tequila in Cabo. I tell him that right after I secured Nana with her private nurse, I booked a direct flight to Chicago. I explain that the moment the plane reached cruising altitude, I plugged in a silver flash drive containing the unedited internal billing logs from Oak Grove Estates. I watch Todd's eyes widen as I mention the drive. I tell him it was the exact same flash drive Nurse Latoya bravely slipped into my hand right before I drove away from that house of horrors. Todd stares at the screen, his jaw tightening as he recognizes the names of his own dummy corporations listed in bright red font. I lean forward, resting my hands flat on the cool marble. I detail the intricate labyrinth of shell companies I traced during that 2-hour flight. I show him the exact routing sequences where Nana's $8,000 monthly pension was siphoned into a fake LLC registered in Delaware. I explain how the stolen funds were subsequently washed through a secondary corporate account, categorized as consulting fees, before being dumped directly into his personal checking account. Valerie gasps, bringing a shaking hand to her mouth. She looks at Todd, demanding to know what I am talking about, but he is too busy glaring at the laptop screen to notice her rising panic. I remind Todd of the text message he sent me mid-flight when he realized I had taken Nana. I quote his exact words back to him, letting the ugly syllables hang in the quiet room. I ask him if he remembers calling me an angry black woman making a scene. I ask him if he remembers threatening to sue me for defamation with his high-priced corporate lawyers if I did not return his cash cow immediately. Kendra steps forward, her voice shrill as she attempts to defend her husband. She screams that it was a legitimate business loan authorized by Valerie. She insists that Todd's lawyers will rip my forensic accounting license to shreds and have me thrown in jail for corporate espionage. She calls me a jealous, childless spinster who just wants to ruin their success and steal Mom's spotlight. I ignore Kendra completely. I keep my eyes locked entirely on Todd. I ask him if he received the reply I sent him from 30,000 feet in the air. I watch the muscle in his jaw twitch violently. I calmly break down his exact corporate structuring flaw out loud for the entire room to hear. I explain that when he registered his fake vendor, LLC, he failed to obscure the parent company's tax identification number, linking the stolen federal pension funds directly to his personal Social Security number. I lower my voice to a dangerous razor-sharp whisper. I remind him that while he was busy playing golf and pretending to be a Silicon Valley titan, I spent 10 years tracing illicit funds and dismantling financial syndicates for the IRS. I tell him he did not just commit elder abuse. He committed wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering on a massive federal level. The color completely drains from Todd's face. The arrogant smirk vanishes, replaced by raw, unfiltered terror. He takes a slow step back, bumping into Kendra. But Valerie is not ready to surrender. She recovers from her initial shock and desperately attempts to salvage her pride. She straightens her posture and glares at me, stating that none of this matters, because she is still the primary executor of Josephine's estate. Valerie confidently declares that they are going to leverage Nana's commercial real estate in downtown Atlanta to cover the startup's debts and pay off any necessary legal fees. She insists the properties are worth millions, and that I cannot legally stop her from selling them to save the family name. A slow, genuine smile spreads across my face. I walk over to the heavy fireproof safe bolted into the wall of my walk-in pantry. I enter the digital code and swing the heavy steel door open. I pull out a thick, wax-sealed manila envelope. I walk back to the island and drop the envelope right on top of Todd's ridiculous cease and desist order. I tell Valerie she is missing one crucial historical detail. I explain the sudden moment of clarity Nana experienced yesterday morning while I was feeding her warm soup. I tell them how Nana, who had not spoken a lucid word in months, gripped my wrist with shocking strength and warned me not to let the white boy find the blue key. I reach into my pocket, pull the small metallic blue key out, and drop it onto the marble island. It lands with a sharp, definitive clink. I tell them the true purpose of my flight to Chicago. I explain that the blue key opened a highly secure safety deposit box in a downtown bank vault. I reach into the manila envelope and pull out the documents, sliding them across the counter so Valerie can see them clearly. I watch Valerie's eyes frantically scan the heavy parchment papers. Her breathing becomes shallow. They are the original unencumbered deeds to the entire block of commercial real estate in downtown Atlanta. My grandfather had quietly purchased them 30 years ago and placed them in a blind trust solely controlled by Nana and now overseen by my legal team. I lean over the counter and explain the harsh reality of their situation. I tell Valerie that without these original physical deeds, she and Todd cannot leverage a single brick of that property. The millions they were counting on to save their fraudulent lifestyle and keep them out of federal prison are completely locked away out of their reach forever. Elias steps forward, holding his sleek smartphone. He smoothly informs my family that he has already forwarded the complete flash drive forensic report Todd's threatening text messages, and the unedited facility billing logs directly to his contacts at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. He taps his expensive watch and reminds them they now have exactly 60 seconds to leave my condo before building security physically removes them. Todd turns around and bolts for the door, not even waiting for his wife. Kendra chases after him, screaming his name, her designer heels echoing down the hallway. Valerie stands frozen, staring at the deeds on the counter. Her empire of lies and stolen wealth has completely crumbled. I look at my mother, feeling absolutely no pity. I tell her to get out of my house. Valerie silently turns and walks out the door, closing it softly behind her. The condo falls blissfully quiet again. Elias gives me a respectful nod and heads back to the guest room to check on Sarah and Nana. I sit back down at my bar stool, taking a deep breath of clean, peaceful air. The war is far from over, but I have just won the most important battle of my life. My phone chimes with an incoming email notification. It is an encrypted message from my former supervisor at the IRS requesting an immediate meeting regarding a massive multi-state tax evasion syndicate. Todd does not say another word. The threat of federal marshals completely shatters his Silicon Valley savior complex. He grabs Kendra by the arm, his grip tight enough to make her wince, and practically drags her out of my front door. Valerie follows them, her dramatic sobs replaced by a suffocating, terrified silence. She does not look at me. She does not look toward the guest room where her mother is finally resting. She just walks out the heavy mahogany door, clicking shut behind her. Elias exhales, smoothing his perfectly tailored lapels. He walks over to the marble kitchen island and looks down at the thick, wax-sealed manila envelope I brought back from Chicago. He asks me to walk him through every single detail of what I found, starting from the moment I left Atlanta. I open my MacBook, the screen glowing brightly in the dimming afternoon light. I tell Elias that the real work began the second I left Nana safely with Sarah, the private nurse, and boarded a direct flight to Chicago O'Hare. I explain how I sat in seat 2A, plugged Nurse Latoya's silver flash drive into my USB port, and initiated a full data extraction. What I found on that drive was a labyrinth of financial deceit so complex it would have fooled any standard auditor. But I am not a standard auditor. I spent 10 years at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division decrypting offshore tax havens, tracing crypto laundering schemes, and dismantling corporate fraud syndicates. Todd's sloppy Silicon Valley accounting was a child's puzzle to me. I open the primary spreadsheet for Elias. I show him the unedited internal billing logs from Oak Grove Estates. Arthur Pendleton had been keeping 2 sets of books. The primary ledger, the one Valerie received, showed a zero balance for Josephine Davis. The hidden ledger, the one Latoya risked her job to download, showed exactly where the money was bleeding out. Every first of the month, Nana's $8,000 federal pension hit her primary trust account. Within 48 hours, an automated clearinghouse transfer swept the entire amount into a secondary holding account. From there, the funds were chopped into smaller randomized wire transfers of varying amounts, $2,000 here, $1,500. They're specifically designed to avoid triggering banking alerts. I point to the highlighted rows on the screen. The money was being funneled directly into a vendor account registered to an LLC called Apex Synergy Consulting. I tell Elias that I ran a quick corporate registry search using the in-flight Wi-Fi. Apex Synergy Consulting was a ghost entity. It had a registered agent in Delaware, a virtual mailbox in Palo Alto, and exactly 0 employees. The sole managing director listed on the incorporation documents was a shell holding company that traced straight back to Todd's tech startup. Todd was billing my grandmother's pension for non-existent consulting services to artificially inflate his startup's revenue stream. He was using stolen elder funds to make his failing company look profitable to venture capitalists. Elias shakes his head in disbelief, leaning closer to the screen. He asks if Todd knows I have this specific proof. I pull out my phone and open my text history. I show Elias the messages Todd sent me while I was 30,000 feet over the Midwest. The facility automated alert system had notified Kendra the moment I removed Nana from the premises. Todd had immediately bypassed my block on Kendra's phone and started firing off threats from his own number. His first message was dripping with his usual entitled condescension. He called me an angry black woman making a desperate scene for attention. He threatened to unleash his team of high-priced corporate litigators to destroy my forensic accounting career. He promised to sue me into absolute bankruptcy for defamation if I did not turn the car around and return his wife's grandmother to the facility immediately. I show Elias my exact response. I did not stoop to his level of emotional hysteria. I replied with pure, calculated facts. I texted Todd a screenshot of his own Delaware incorporation filings. I broke down his exact corporate structuring flaw in a single devastating paragraph. I explained that when he set up Apex Synergy Consulting, he failed to obscure the parent company's tax identification number. I pointed out that the routing numbers on the wire transfers linked the stolen federal pension funds directly to his personal Social Security number. I reminded him that while he was busy playing 18 holes of golf and pretending to be a tech visionary, I was building a career tearing apart illicit financial networks for the federal government. I told him his lawyers were going to need their own criminal defense attorneys. Todd had not sent a single text message after that. The silence had been absolute until they attempted their pathetic ambush today. Elias reads the exchange and lets out a low whistle. He asks about the manila envelope on the counter. He asks how the Chicago trip fits into Todd's corporate fraud. I slide the blue key across the marble island. I tell Elias about the moment Nana gripped my wrist and warned me about the safety deposit box. I explain how I arrived at the downtown Chicago bank branch, straight from the airport. The bank was an old fortress-like building with marble floors and brass fixtures. I presented my credentials, signed the access ledger, and followed the vault manager into the secure steel room. The air inside smelled of old paper and dust. I expected to find emergency cash old stock certificates, or perhaps some valuable family heirlooms. I did not expect to find the ultimate leverage. I pull the thick parchment documents out of the envelope and spread them flat across the counter. They are not just property records. They are the original physical unencumbered deeds to an entire block of premium commercial real estate in downtown Atlanta. My grandfather had quietly purchased the block 30 years ago, anticipating the city's urban expansion. He had placed the deeds in a blind trust, solely controlled by Nana. I point to the current market valuations I pulled up this morning. The property is worth upwards of $40 million. I explain the real reason Valerie downgraded Nana's care and why Todd was so desperate to establish financial dominance. Todd's startup was bleeding cash rapidly. His investors were demanding returns, and he was on the verge of total collapse. They needed massive collateral to secure a bridge loan to keep the company afloat. Valerie had tried to use her medical power of attorney to claim Nana was incapacitated, hoping to seize control of the estate and leverage the Atlanta property for Todd's corporate debt. But they needed the original physical deeds to satisfy the commercial lenders. They had spent the last 8 months tearing Nana's house apart looking for these exact documents. They kept her drugged, isolated, and neglected in that horrific facility, hoping she would eventually slip away or give up the location of the blue key. They never imagined she would hold on to that secret with ironclad willpower. They never imagined she would pass the baton to me. Elias carefully examines the deeds, his legal mind running through the implications. He looks up at me, his eyes sharp and focused. He states that because Josephine formally revoked the power of attorney this morning, and because these deeds are secured in our possession, Todd's company has zero legitimate collateral. I nod slowly. I tell Elias that it gets much worse for them. Todd did not just lie to his venture capitalists about his revenue stream. He likely committed federal loan fraud by claiming he had access to collateral that he did not legally control. I open a new tab on my laptop. I pull up a direct contact form for the Securities and Exchange Commission cross-referenced with my former colleagues at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. I look at Elias and tell him it is time to stop playing defense. It is time to burn their stolen empire straight to the ground. I attach the facility billing logs, the Delaware LLC tax discrepancies, and the wire routing sequences into a highly encrypted folder. I type out a formal whistleblower report detailing the exact mechanisms of Todd's money laundering scheme and Valerie's complicity in the financial exploitation of a vulnerable federal pensioner. I do not hesitate. I do not feel an ounce of guilt. I hit send. The room is completely silent, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator. The digital payload is out. Within 48 hours, federal agents will be walking into Todd's pristine Silicon Valley office, holding subpoenas and asset freeze warrants. Valerie will have to explain to her wealthy country club friends why the FBI is auditing her personal bank accounts. Kendra will have to watch her luxury SUVs get repossessed from her driveway. I close the laptop and take a deep breath. For the first time in 10 years, the heavy, suffocating weight of being my family's designated scapegoat lifts entirely from my shoulders. I walk down the hallway and quietly open the door to the guest suite. Nana is sleeping peacefully, her chest rising and falling in a steady, healthy rhythm. The harsh lines of pain and neglect on her face have already begun to soften. I sit in the chair next to her bed, ready to watch over her while the storm I just unleashed obliterates the people who tried to throw us away. I sit alone at my kitchen island, listening to the heavy silence of the condo. The air finally feels clean again, after the toxic whirlwind of my family's forced entry. I take a slow sip of my coffee and let the reality of what just happened wash over me. The federal agents are likely already mobilizing based on the encrypted package Elias forwarded to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. Todd's fraudulent tech empire is currently standing on a trapdoor, and I am the one holding the lever. Then my phone screen lights up. It vibrates violently against the marble countertop. I glance down and see a notification from Facebook. Valerie Davis is live. I tap the notification and lean back in my chair. The screen fills with my mother's tear-stained face. She is standing on the sidewalk directly outside my high-rise building in Washington, D.C. The wind is whipping her perfectly styled hair around her face, adding a brilliant touch of cinematic desperation to her performance. She is looking directly into the camera, addressing her massive congregation back at her megachurch in Atlanta. Her voice trembles with practiced theatrical agony. She tells her thousands of followers that her heart is completely broken. She wipes a tear from her cheek and claims that her troubled, estranged daughter has just committed an unforgivable sin. Valerie looks into the lens and cries that I have kidnapped her elderly, fragile mother. She spins a masterclass of manipulation, telling her church friends that I am mentally unstable and acting out of pure spite and jealousy. She begs for their prayers. She asks her congregation to pray for Josephine's safe return and to pray for my dark, twisted soul. She claims she is standing outside my fortress completely helpless because I have weaponized the legal system against my own flesh and blood to hold my grandmother hostage. I watch the viewer count on her live stream skyrocket. The comment section becomes a cascading waterfall of misplaced sympathy and absolute outrage directed entirely at me. Church elders, family friends, and distant relatives are sending praying hands emojis and calling for divine intervention against the wicked daughter. Valerie has done what she always does when she loses control. She has weaponized the community to cast me as the ultimate villain. My phone immediately begins to ring off the hook. The screen flashes with names I have not seen in years. Aunts, uncles, and cousins are crawling out of the woodwork summoned by Valerie's digital bat signal. I ignore the calls, watching the missed call notifications stack up like a high score. The text messages flood in right behind them. They call me a disgrace to the family name. They demand I seek psychiatric help. They tell me I am going straight to hell for disrespecting my mother and endangering my grandmother. A voice note notification pops up from Aunt Celeste. She is my father's sister and the only relative who ever showed me a fraction of genuine warmth when I was a child. I tap the play button. Her voice fills my quiet kitchen, dripping with heavy disappointment. She tells me she just saw Valerie's video and she is disgusted. She tells me that whatever petty jealousies I have regarding Kendra's success, I need to put them aside. She orders me to stop embarrassing the family on a public stage and to return Nana to the premium care facility where she belongs. She tells me I have gone too far this time. The betrayal stings for a fraction of a second before my forensic training takes over. I am immune to their gaslighting now. They are reacting to a carefully curated script, designed to keep them completely blind to the financial slaughter happening right under their noses. The phone vibrates again. This time it is a direct call from my older cousin Marcus. Marcus has always fancied himself the patriarch of our generation since he became a junior partner at a mid-sized law firm in Atlanta. He loves to mediate family disputes by lecturing everyone else. I decide to answer this one. I hit the green button and put him on speakerphone. Marcus does not even say hello. He immediately launches into a booming, authoritative tirade. He demands to know what on earth I am thinking. He tells me I am acting like a lunatic and that kidnapping a legally dependent elder is going to ruin my federal career. He orders me to turn my SUV around right this second and drive Nana back to Georgia before Todd unleashes his legal team and destroys my life. I let him talk until he runs out of breath. I wait for 3 full seconds of dead silence on the line. Marcus, I say, keeping my voice dangerously low and perfectly steady. Did Auntie Valerie happen to mention to you on that Facebook live stream that she explicitly canceled Nana's comprehensive health insurance policy 8 months ago? Marcus stammers, a confused noise escaping his throat. I do not let him interrupt. I ask him if Valerie mentioned that she downgraded Nana to a Medicaid overflow closet, where she developed stage 2 bed sores. I ask him if Valerie told the church congregation that she redirected Nana's monthly federal pension into a fake LLC to buy Kendra a brand new Tesla. The silence on his end is absolute. The confident, booming patriarch is suddenly choking on his own tongue. I tell Marcus that I have the unedited billing logs, the fraudulent wire transfer routes, and the original commercial property deeds sitting right in front of me. I inform him that the IRS Criminal Investigation Division is currently preparing federal indictments for wire fraud and tax evasion. I tell him that if he does not know the actual facts of the corporate theft his aunt just committed, he needs to stay out of my business before he implicates his own law firm in a federal money laundering investigation. I tap the red end call button and flip my phone face down on the marble counter. The noise of the family ceases to exist. I do not care what they post on social media. I do not care what lies Valerie spins to her prayer group. They are fighting a public relations battle on Facebook, while I am fighting a financial war on the federal level. I turn my attention back to my MacBook. The silver flash drive LaToya gave me is still mounted to my desktop. I need to make sure I have completely mapped every single one of Todd's escape routes before the federal agents freeze his primary accounts. If Todd realizes Elias is moving against him, he will try to liquidate whatever phantom assets he has left and move the cash offshore. I crack my knuckles and dive back into the labyrinth of his shell companies. I run a secondary deep scan on the routing numbers associated with Apex Synergy Consulting. I cross-reference the dummy vendor account against international SWIFT codes, looking for any recent anomalies in Todd's transaction history. My eyes scan the scrolling lines of financial data filtering through the noise of his pathetic country club dues and Kendra's luxury shopping sprees. Suddenly, I hit a massive, glaring red flag. My fingers fly across the keyboard as I isolate a highly encrypted ledger hidden beneath a secondary firewall. It is a corporate escrow account completely detached from the primary startup funds. I crack the encryption key using a backdoor protocol I developed during my time at the agency. The screen refreshes and the raw data hits me like a physical punch to the gut. There is a pending international wire transfer sitting in the escrow account. It is scheduled for automatic release at exactly midnight this coming Friday. The amount is a staggering $2 million. I trace the destination of the wire. It is routing to a private offshore banking institution in the Cayman Islands known for sheltering untraceable corporate funds. But that is not the part that makes my blood run cold. I trace the origin of the $2 million. It is not venture capital funding. It is a mezzanine bridge loan issued by a highly aggressive predatory commercial lender in New York. I open the digital loan origination documents attached to the wire. Todd did not just lie about his revenue. He went to a shadow lender who does not require standard federal compliance checks. Todd secured the $2 million offshore loan by officially listing Nana's downtown Atlanta commercial real estate block as the primary collateral. He forged the initial asset declaration forms, using Valerie's revoked power of attorney, before he even knew I possessed the original physical deeds. He initiated the loan protocol days ago, assuming Valerie would eventually find the blue key and hand over the actual parchment deeds to finalize the lien. The terrifying reality of his strategy crystallizes in my mind. The commercial lender does not know the collateral is fraudulent yet. The automated system is set to clear the $2 million offshore wire by Friday midnight, based on the forged preliminary paperwork. If that money clears the international boundary and vanishes into the Cayman Islands, the predatory lender will immediately place a permanent, unshakable lien against Josephine Davis's estate to recoup their massive loss. Even with the original deeds safe in my fireproof vault, Nana would be trapped in a decade-long legal nightmare fighting a ruthless corporate entity for control of her own property. Todd is attempting to steal $2 million in untraceable cash and stick my grandmother with the catastrophic liability. I check the digital clock in the corner of my screen. It is currently Wednesday afternoon. I have less than 48 hours to dismantle an international wire transfer, intercept a fraudulent commercial loan, and prove to a shadow banking syndicate that their primary collateral is completely void. I pull my phone back out, flip it over, and open a direct encrypted line to Elias. The family drama is officially over. The corporate execution has begun. Thursday morning arrives with the sharp chill of impending consequences. I sit at my home office desk in Washington watching the digital clock on my monitor tick toward 8 o'clock. The $2 million wire transfer Todd initiated is currently sitting in a holding queue scheduled to bypass domestic security checks by Friday midnight. I have exactly 36 hours to kill the transaction and sever Todd's financial lifeline. I open my encrypted email client and attach the freshly notarized documents Elias prepared the day before. I include the comprehensive independent psychiatric evaluation declaring Nana of sound mind and the legally binding revocation of Valerie's power of attorney. I hit send, directing the package straight to the primary commercial lending manager at the Atlanta bank branch Todd is using. I pick up my phone and dial the direct extension listed on the bank's corporate directory. It rings twice before a man answers. Harrison Vance, Senior Vice President of Commercial Lending. His voice is smooth-coated in the kind of Southern corporate charm that usually masks absolute incompetence. I introduce myself as Josephine Davis's granddaughter and financial representative. I calmly inform him that I just emailed official legal documentation revoking the power of attorney associated with the $2 million collateralized loan requested by Todd's tech startup. I explicitly instruct him to halt the pending wire transfer immediately. There is a brief rustling of paper on the other end of the line, followed by a low, patronizing chuckle. Harrison does not sound alarmed. He sounds incredibly amused. He tells me he received an email but insists that a sudden revocation is not officially in their system yet. He casually mentions that he and Todd are playing a round of golf at the Buckhead Country Club this weekend, and that Todd already warned him about this exact situation. Todd told me you might try something like this. Harrison sighs, his voice dripping with wealthy white male privilege. He said you have been estranged from the family for years and are currently having a bit of a financial crisis. Listen, Maya, I understand you are upset about your brother-in-law's success, but trying to extort a legitimate business by tying up their capital is a very dangerous game. I am not stopping a federally cleared wire transfer just because a disgruntled relative is throwing a tantrum. The sheer audacity of his response would have enraged me 5 years ago. Today, it just fuels my absolute precision. Harrison is not just blindly processing a loan. He is actively protecting his golf buddy and willfully ignoring legal documentation to push through a massive commission. I do not raise my voice. I do not let a single ounce of emotion bleed into my words. I lean back in my ergonomic desk chair and pull up my secondary monitor. Harrison, I say, keeping my tone conversational, let us talk about your definition of a legitimate business. I read directly from the screen in front of me. I casually bring up the compliance audit his specific branch underwent 18 months ago. I list the exact regulatory infractions his team was cited for, including a failure to properly verify collateral on high-risk commercial loans. I hear the rhythmic tapping of his pen stop completely. I inform him that the commercial real estate deeds Todd used to secure this $2 million offshore loan belong to my grandmother. I tell him those deeds are currently locked inside a fireproof safe in my federal jurisdiction. I warn him that processing a massively flagged transaction under a legally revoked power of attorney does not just make him negligent. It makes him a direct co-conspirator to elder fraud, money laundering, and international wire fraud. You are way out of your depth, little girl. Harrison snaps, his corporate charm entirely gone, replaced by defensive venom. You do not dictate banking policy to me. That wire is clearing on Friday, and if you call this line again, I will have our legal department slap you with a harassment suit. He laughs, a harsh, grating sound, and slams the phone down. The line goes dead. I place my phone on the desk. He actually thought hanging up on me would end the conversation. He has no idea that I was not calling to ask for a favor. I was calling to establish a documented timeline of his willful negligence. I immediately open a secure encrypted browser and log directly into the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network portal. As a licensed forensic accountant with federal clearance, I do not have to wait in line to file a grievance. I open a fresh suspicious activity report and begin uploading the digital payload. I attach the unedited facility billing logs from LaToya's flash drive. I upload the fraudulent wire routing sequences, proving Todd's shell company is a ghost entity. I attach the revoked power of attorney, the medical evaluations, and the precise timestamp of my phone call with Harrison Vance. I draft a concise, devastating summary of the offshore loan fraud, explicitly naming Harrison as a non-compliant banking official actively facilitating the theft of a federal pensioner's assets. I check every box. I cross every legal threshold. I hit submit. The federal portal generates a unique case tracking number. The trap is officially set. The bureaucratic machinery of the United States Treasury is slow when it comes to average citizens, but when a licensed federal investigator flags an active $2 million offshore wire transfer linked to elder abuse, the system moves with terrifying speed. I spend the rest of the day working from my home office finalizing the complete forensic audit of Nana's estate for Elias. The afternoon fades into evening, and the condo remains perfectly quiet. Nana is resting comfortably under Sarah's care, her color already returning, her breathing steady and peaceful. The hours tick by. I order dinner, review a few separate client files, and watch the city lights of Washington illuminate the skyline through my floor-to-ceiling windows. I do not pace. I do not worry. I know exactly how mathematical certainty works. At exactly 11 o'clock that night, the silence of the condo is broken by the sharp ringing of my cell phone. I look down at the glowing screen. The caller ID displays the corporate headquarters of the banking institution Harrison works for. It is not Harrison's direct line. It is a routing number originating from their executive compliance division. I swipe the green icon and answer the call, holding the phone to my ear. Miss Davis, a man says, his voice tight, breathless, and thick with absolute panic. My name is Richard Sterling. I am the Regional Vice President of Commercial Operations. We received an emergency federal alert regarding a suspicious activity report you filed this morning. I do not speak. I let the silence stretch out, forcing him to fill the void. Miss Davis, he continues, his words stumbling over each other in a frantic rush. I want to assure you personally that the $2 million wire transfer initiated by Todd's holding company has been completely frozen on a federal level. The transaction is dead. We are cooperating fully with the Treasury Department. Harrison Vance has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending a criminal investigation into his loan approval protocols. I trace the edge of my coffee mug, feeling a profound sense of closure. Todd's money is gone. His corporate lifeline has been severed. His primary banking ally is facing federal ruin. Richard begs me to confirm that the bank is not the primary target of my investigation. He practically pleads for me to understand that this was a rogue action by a single negligent manager. He offers to personally oversee the complete restoration of Josephine Davis's accounts. I tell Richard I will have my attorney Elias contact his legal department in the morning to discuss the exact financial reparations the bank will be making to my grandmother's estate to avoid a public negligence lawsuit. I end the call before he can offer another pathetic apology. I set the phone down and look out over the city. Todd tried to leverage our family's legacy to save his own ego. He thought he could steal from a woman who built her life from the ground up and get away with it because he played golf with the right people. He is about to wake up tomorrow morning completely bankrupt, facing federal indictment and absolutely powerless. The Friday morning sun streams through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my condo, casting long, bright shadows across the hardwood floor. I am sitting at my kitchen island with a fresh cup of coffee, watching Elias meticulously organize a stack of legal briefs. He arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, carrying espresso and an unshakable sense of victory. We spent the first hour of the morning listening to a series of increasingly desperate voicemails left by Richard Sterling, the bank executive whose career I effectively torpedoed the night before. Todd is completely locked out of his accounts, and the federal freeze has triggered a catastrophic chain reaction through his ghost LLCs. Right at 9 o'clock, my cell phone vibrates against the marble countertop. The caller ID displays Valerie's name. Elias pauses mid-sentence, raising a perfectly groomed eyebrow. He gestures toward the phone, giving me a silent nod of encouragement. I tap the green accept button and put the call on speakerphone so Elias can hear every single word. Valerie does not scream. She does not threaten me with federal marshals or hurl insults about my lifestyle. Instead, a soft, syrupy voice fills the kitchen. She calls me her sweet girl. She uses a childhood pet name I have not heard since I was 10 years old. Her tone is carefully modulated, dripping with artificial warmth and manufactured exhaustion. She tells me that the events of the past few days have been incredibly stressful for everyone, and that family should never fight like this. She sighs heavily, playing the role of the heartbroken peacemaker. Valerie tells me that Thanksgiving is exactly 1 week away. She paints a vivid picture of her sprawling mega mansion in Atlanta, describing the massive dining room table and the elaborate holiday menu she is already planning. She officially invites me to a reconciliation Thanksgiving dinner. She claims that if I just pack up my SUV and bring Nana back down to Georgia, we can all sit at the table, break bread, and heal our fractured bonds. She promises that if I do this, she will convince Todd to drop all of his legal hostilities and forgive my little misunderstanding with the bank. I take a slow sip of my coffee, letting the sheer audacity of her proposal settle over the room. She is attempting to bargain with absolutely zero leverage. She is offering to drop imaginary lawsuits in exchange for the woman whose pension she has been stealing for nearly a year. Before I can even formulate a response, the polished facade of the phone call completely shatters. A loud, panicked wail erupts in the background. Kendra snatches the phone away from our mother, her voice shrill and trembling with raw, unfiltered terror. The perfectly curated country club wife has vanished. Kendra screams into the receiver, begging me to lift the federal freeze immediately. She cries that Todd's primary investors have realized the $2 million offshore bridge loan was blocked. She wails that these are not standard Silicon Valley venture capitalists, but ruthless shadow lenders who do not play by corporate rules. Kendra sobs uncontrollably, weaponizing her tears in a desperate attempt to manipulate my empathy. She tells me that the investors are threatening to ruin them, to seize their personal assets, to destroy their lives, and completely dismantle Todd's reputation if the funds do not clear by the end of the business day. She begs me to have a heart, claiming that I am destroying her marriage and punishing her for things she did not even understand. I do not feel a single ounce of pity. I look at Elias, who is shaking his head in sheer disgust at the performance. Kendra, I say, my voice slicing through her hysterical sobbing like a scalpel. Let us talk about having a heart. Let us talk about family loyalty. Her crying hitches, pausing for a fraction of a second. I ask her if she remembers the summer I graduated from high school. I paint the picture for her, forcing her to relive the exact moment. I remind her about the thick white envelope sitting on the kitchen counter, containing $2,000 in cash that Grandpa had saved up specifically for my college laptop and dorm supplies. I remind her how that envelope mysteriously vanished the exact same afternoon she came home carrying 3 pairs of limited edition red bottom designer heels she absolutely could not afford on a part-time receptionist's salary. Kendra stammers a weak, pathetic denial attempting to play the victim, but I cut her off instantly. I remind her of exactly what happened when I brought the empty envelope to our mother in tears. I remind her how Valerie looked me dead in the eye, told me I was being an ungrateful, selfish child for accusing my older sister, and ordered me to just get over it. I remind her that Valerie forced me to work double shifts at a local diner all summer just to replace the money my sister stole to fund her luxury aesthetic. I lean closer to the phone, my voice dropping to a dead calm whisper. I tell Kendra that I got over it a long time ago. I tell her that I learned exactly how this family operates when money is involved, and that her tears are entirely wasted on me. I inform her that her husband committed federal wire fraud using stolen property deeds, and that the shadow lenders currently breathing down his neck are a natural consequence of his own profound arrogance. Valerie snatches the phone back, her sweet facade entirely gone, replaced by sharp, desperate panic. She demands to know if I am coming to the dinner or not. She insists that I owe it to the family to face them in person and negotiate a settlement before the situation becomes unfixable. I tell Valerie that Nana is perfectly comfortable in her orthopedic bed receiving round-the-clock premium medical care. I state unequivocally that Josephine Davis will never set foot in the state of Georgia or that house of horrors ever again. But I will be there. I add, a cold smile spreading across my face. I tell her to set an extra plate at her massive dining room table. I tell her I am flying down to Atlanta for Thanksgiving, and I will gladly walk right through her front door to discuss the exact terms of our new reality. I hit the red button and end the call, severing the connection before Valerie can utter another manipulative word. The kitchen is silent again. Elias sets his pen down on the marble island and looks at me with genuine concern. He leans forward, folding his hands together. He asks me if I have lost my mind. He asks if I am seriously planning to fly to Atlanta and walk into a heavily guarded hostile environment completely alone with 3 desperate people who are facing federal prison and financial ruin. I do not flinch. I stand up from my bar stool and walk over to my home office desk, situated in the corner of the living room. I open the heavy bottom drawer and pull out a thick stack of freshly printed bright red legal folders. They are heavy, packed with hundreds of pages of undeniable forensic evidence, signed affidavits, and federal reporting confirmations. I walk back to the kitchen island and drop the stack of red folders directly in front of Elias. The thick, heavy thud echoes in the quiet condo. I look at my attorney and shake my head, my smile turning sharp and predatory. I am not going down there to negotiate, I tell him, my voice ringing with absolute certainty. I am going down there to serve them. The crisp autumn air of Thanksgiving Day does absolutely nothing to mask the suffocating toxicity waiting for me at the end of the driveway. I pull my rented sedan through the wrought iron gates of Todd and Kendra's sprawling Atlanta mega mansion. The winding driveway is a parade of ostentatious wealth. It is packed edge to edge with gleaming luxury vehicles, a matte black G-Wagon, a pristine Porsche Panamera, and a fleet of high-end Mercedes SUVs belonging to our extended family. It looks exactly like a luxury dealership funded entirely by a lifetime of financial deceit and stolen federal pensions. I park my modest rental car right behind Todd's Maserati, killing the engine and gripping the steering wheel for one final moment of absolute clarity. I grab the heavy leather tote bag sitting on the passenger seat. I do not feel nervous. I do not feel the familiar childhood dread that usually suffocates me when I am around these people. I feel like a federal auditor walking into a secured crime scene. I walk up the wide stone steps and push open the double mahogany front doors without bothering to knock. The heavy scent of roasted sage butter and expensive floral perfume hits me instantly, attempting to mask the underlying rot of the household. A wall of loud, forced laughter and clinking crystal echoes from the formal dining room down the hall. I walk deliberately across the polished hardwood floors, turning the corner and stepping directly into the massive dining room. The laughter dies instantly. The room goes completely dead silent. 20 extended family members, aunts, uncles, and cousins who have ignored my existence for a decade freeze in their seats. The hostility in the air is instantly palpable, thick enough to choke on. Forks hover over porcelain plates. Wine glasses are slowly lowered to the table. Every single pair of eyes locks onto me, dripping with judgment and misplaced self-righteousness. Todd sits at the absolute head of the massive mahogany table, treating the Thanksgiving dinner like a corporate board meeting. He is wearing a custom-tailored suit, trying desperately to project the image of an unshakable Silicon Valley titan, but I can see the fine sheen of nervous sweat on his forehead. Flanking him to his immediate right is a man I do not recognize. He is wearing a sharp charcoal suit and a menacing predatory scowl. He is clearly the high-priced corporate shark Todd brought in to intimidate me into submission. The lawyer glares at me, folding his hands on top of a thick stack of legal documents resting next to his dinner plate. Kendra sits to Todd's left, aggressively gripping her wine glass. Her designer makeup is flawless, but her eyes are bloodshot and frantic, the reality of her collapsing lifestyle clearly taking its toll. At the opposite end of the table, Valerie stands up. She smooths down the front of her expensive silk dress and taps a silver spoon against her crystal wine glass, commanding the attention of the entire room. She bows her head and adopts a posture of profound religious suffering. "Let us pray," Valerie announces, her voice echoing loudly off the vaulted ceilings. The extended family immediately bows their heads, clasping their hands together. I do not bow my head. I stand perfectly still at the edge of the room, my eyes locked entirely on my mother. "Lord, we come to you today with heavy but hopeful hearts." Valerie begins spinning a masterclass of public shaming, disguised as spiritual devotion. "We ask you to look down upon this table and heal our fractured family. We ask you to shine your divine light into the dark places. Lord, we specifically ask you to forgive Maya for her jealousy and her mental instability. We pray that you cleanse her troubled soul of the bitter spite that led her to kidnap her own fragile grandmother. Guide her back to the path of righteousness, Lord, so she can stop hurting the people who have given her everything. Amen." A chorus of solemn amens echoes around the table. Aunt Celeste shoots me a withering glare of absolute disgust. Marcus, my lawyer cousin, shakes his head in performative pity. Valerie slowly raises her head, dropping the pious spiritual voice entirely. The sweet motherly facade vanishes, leaving behind a vicious, calculating sneer. She sets her wine glass down and crosses her arms over her chest, looking at me as if I am something scraping the bottom of her shoe. "You have always been a bitter, lonely girl, Maya," Valerie says, her voice echoing in the dead silent room. Every syllable is designed to humiliate me in front of the audience she has carefully assembled. "You could never find a decent man. You could never build a perfect life like your sister. You could never succeed at anything that actually mattered. You are so miserable in your own life that you stole your grandmother just to feel important. You created this entire delusion just to get a fraction of the attention Kendra gets every single day." Kendra lets out a dramatic sob, pressing a manicured hand to her chest, playing the role of the traumatized victim perfectly. Todd leans forward, resting his elbows on the table. His corporate lawyer aggressively taps a sleek gold pen against the polished mahogany. Valerie gestures toward the thick stack of legal papers sitting next to the lawyer. She tells me the performance is officially over. She states that I am going to walk over to the table, pick up that pen, and sign the brand new power of attorney, transferring absolute legal and medical control of Josephine Davis back to her. "If you do not sign that document right now," Valerie warns, her voice dropping to a dangerous hiss, "Todd's lawyer is going to file a massive civil suit against you in federal court first thing tomorrow morning. He is going to sue you for corporate sabotage, elder abduction, and defamation. He will take your condo, your savings, and whatever pathetic federal pension you have managed to scrape together. You will be completely bankrupt by Christmas. Sign the paper, Maya. Make things right, and we will let you walk out of here with your freedom." The entire extended family stares at me, waiting for me to break. They expect me to crumble under the weight of their collective judgment. They expect the insecure 20-year-old scapegoat to burst into tears, apologize for causing a scene, and blindly sign my grandmother's life away to keep the peace. I walk slowly toward an empty chair near the center of the table. I sit down, placing my heavy leather tote bag on the floor next to my feet. I look down at the lavish spread of food resting on the fine china. I do not touch a single bite. I reach out, pick up a crystal glass of ice water, and take a very slow, deliberate sip. I swallow, set the glass back down on the coaster, and stand up to my full height. I look past my mother, past my glaring extended family, and lock eyes completely with Todd. I watch the false confidence completely drain from his expression as he sees the absolute chilling calmness in my posture. I reach down into my heavy leather bag. I pull out a thick, freshly printed stack of heavy red folders. "I didn't come here to eat your dry turkey, Valerie," I say, my voice slicing through the dining room with absolute authority. "I came here to deliver some reading material." I hold Todd's panicked gaze for a fraction of a second before lifting my right hand. I snap my fingers twice, the sharp sound cutting through the heavy silence of the dining room. The massive oak doors leading to the grand foyer swing open entirely. Gideon, the private security contractor I retained through Elias's firm, steps over the threshold. Gideon is 6'4", built like a freight train, and dressed in an immaculate stark black tactical suit that contrasts violently with the opulent gold leaf decor of Valerie's mega mansion. He carries two heavy canvas briefcases by his sides. He does not speak. He does not acknowledge the shocked gasps from my extended family. He walks directly to my side, unzips the heavy canvas, and retrieves a thick stack of bright blood-red, heavy-duty legal folders. I take the first stack from his hands. I do not hand them out politely. I walk slowly around the massive mahogany table, my heels striking the hardwood floor with deliberate, measured rhythm, and I drop a folder directly onto the center of every single person's plate. The heavy cardstock slaps against the fine bone china, rattling the crystal wine glasses and disrupting the perfectly arranged silver centerpieces. I drop one on Aunt Celeste's plate. I drop one on Cousin Marcus's plate. I drop one directly over the roasted sage butter turkey sitting right in front of Valerie. Todd suddenly realizes exactly what is happening. The false, arrogant confidence drains from his face, replaced by a blotchy, mottled crimson panic. He leaps up from his chair at the head of the table, his knee catching the heavy wood and knocking his crystal goblet over. The red wine spills across the pristine white tablecloth, spreading like fresh blood toward the red folders. He lunges across the table, his arms outstretched, desperately, trying to snatch the folders away from my aunts and uncles before they can break the seals. He screams at the top of his lungs, his voice cracking with pure hysteria. He claims that these are strictly confidential corporate documents covered under airtight non-disclosure agreements. He yells that anyone who opens the folders will be sued into absolute oblivion by his tech startup's legal department. He demands that everyone step away from the table immediately. He makes a frantic sweeping grab for Aunt Celeste's folder, but before his manicured fingers can even brush the heavy red paper, Gideon moves. Gideon shifts with terrifying calculated speed, stepping squarely between Todd and the rest of the table. He plants his feet, squares his incredibly broad shoulders, and rests his right hand casually but firmly against the heavy tactical belt at his waist. He does not draw a weapon, but the implication is absolute and uncompromising. He stares down at Todd with dead flat eyes. Todd hits an invisible wall, his arrogance shattering completely against the reality of actual physical consequences. He takes a stumbling step backward, his chest heaving, his eyes darting frantically toward his high-priced corporate lawyer for backup. But the shark in the charcoal suit has already read the room. The lawyer takes one look at Gideon, one look at the sheer volume of forensic evidence in those red folders, and slowly slides his chair backward, creating a very clear, undeniable physical distance between himself and Todd. He knows a federal trap when he sees one. I stand at the opposite end of the table and give the command. I tell my family to open the files. Cousin Marcus, the self-proclaimed patriarch, who demanded I return Nana just yesterday, is the first to flip open the heavy red cover. Aunt Celeste follows, her hands trembling slightly as she turns the first glossy page. Within seconds, the rustling of thick paper fills the dining room, completely replacing the sounds of forced holiday cheer and Todd's pathetic breathing. I begin to pace slowly behind their chairs, my voice projecting clearly and steadily over their heads, commanding the narrative. I tell them they are looking at the unedited, unfiltered truth behind Todd's Silicon Valley success story and Valerie's sudden burst of extreme mega mansion generosity. I instruct them to look at Exhibit A. I watch their eyes widen and their jaws slacken as they stare at the high-resolution glossy photographs I took inside Oak Grove Estates. They are staring at crystal-clear images of our family matriarch, the woman who built the foundation of every single success in this room, lying on a stained, sunken mattress. They see the cheap, soiled paper hospital gown she was forced to wear. They see the deep purple bruising of the stage, two bed sores developing along her fragile spine. They see the hollow, sunken look in her eyes caused by months of chemical restraints and deliberate starvation. Aunt Celeste lets out a sharp, visceral gasp of horror, immediately covering her mouth with both hands. Marcus turns visibly pale, his eyes darting from the photograph of his grandmother directly to Valerie, who is gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles are bone white. I do not let them look away. I instruct them to turn the page to Exhibit B. I tell them to match the dates printed on the Oak Grove internal billing logs with the offshore bank statements printed on the opposite page. I narrate the timeline for them, ensuring no one misses the connection. I point out the exact day Valerie authorized the cancellation of Nana's premium supplemental health insurance to save $800 a month. I direct their attention to the corresponding receipt printed right next to it, showing a $10,000 down payment on Kendra's brand new custom-ordered Tesla Model X, processed exactly 48 hours later. I walk behind Kendra's chair. She is staring straight ahead, tears pouring down her cheeks, shaking her head in silent, pathetic denial. I remind Kendra loudly of the summer I graduated from high school, the summer she stole my $2,000 graduation money to buy designer heels, and how Valerie told me to just get over it. I tell the entire room that Kendra never outgrew her entitlement, she just found a bigger, more vulnerable target to steal from. I read the numbers out loud, forcing the reality of the theft into the room. I list the country club initiation fees, the Cabo San Lucas luxury villa rentals, the designer handbags, the massive catering deposits for this very Thanksgiving dinner, and the thousands of dollars in phantom consulting fees routed directly into Todd's personal checking account. I explain that every single luxury they have flaunted over the past 10 months, every piece of designer clothing they are wearing right now, was paid for by siphoning the pension and assets of the woman they locked away in a Medicaid overflow closet. The dining room descends into absolute chaos. Aunt Celeste turns to Valerie, her voice shaking with pure, unadulterated disgust, asking how she could possibly do this to her own mother. Marcus slams his hand down on the mahogany table, glaring at Todd and demanding to know if the wire transfer logs and the shell company documents are real. The corporate lawyer quietly stands up, packs his leather briefcase, and walks out the front door, entirely abandoning his client without uttering a single objection or billing a single hour. Valerie tries to speak, opening her mouth to weave another web of religious manipulation and victimhood, but the words die in her throat. She has no script for this. The undeniable paper trail has stripped away every ounce of her self-righteous armor. Kendra is sobbing hysterically into her hands, the reality of her collapsing lifestyle finally breaking her delusion. I walk back to the center of the room. I raise my voice just loud enough to cut through the escalating arguments and shouting erupting around the table. I tell them to stop talking and turn to the very last page in the red folder. The rustling of heavy paper echoes one final time. Then the room goes dead cold. The arguing stops instantly. The silence is heavy, suffocating, and absolute. The aunts and uncles stare down at the final document, the color completely draining from their faces. They are staring at a flawless, certified copy of a federal indictment notice issued jointly by the United States Treasury Department and the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. The charges are explicitly outlined in bold black ink: wire fraud, tax evasion, international money laundering, elder financial exploitation. And printed clearly at the very top of the federal document, entirely unredacted, are the names Todd Blackwood and Valerie Davis. The silence in the dining room lasts exactly 3 seconds before the entire space completely detonates. The shock holding the extended family hostage violently shatters, replaced by a deafening chorus of outrage, disbelief, and sheer panic. Chairs scrape harshly against the polished hardwood floors as aunts and uncles physically recoil from the table. Cousin Marcus stands up so fast his heavy oak chair tips backward and crashes to the ground. He points a trembling finger directly at Todd, his face purple with fury, loudly demanding to know if federal agents are about to kick the front doors down. Aunt Celeste is clutching the red folder against her chest like a shield, her voice shrill as she shouts over the chaos, demanding Valerie explain the federal charges printed in stark black ink. The carefully maintained facade of Atlanta high society has instantly vaporized, leaving a room full of terrified people desperate to distance themselves from a sinking ship. At the head of the table, the golden child is entirely coming apart. Kendra does not join the shouting. She is completely paralyzed, her eyes locked on the second page of the indictment summary inside her folder. Her perfectly manicured hands are shaking so violently that the heavy cardstock rattles against the mahogany table. I watch as her eyes track back and forth across the legal text, her breathing growing shallow and rapid. She is reading the specific details of the offshore bridge loan. She is reading the exact names listed on the corporate guarantor documents. A low, guttural sound escapes Kendra's throat. It is a sound of absolute, unadulterated terror. She drops the folder and turns slowly toward her husband. Todd is already backing away from her, his hands raised defensively, the arrogant Silicon Valley titan completely replaced by a cornered, sweating coward. "You forged my name!" Kendra whispers, her voice trembling so badly it barely carries over the shouting relatives. Todd stammers out a pathetic, fragmented excuse about corporate restructuring and marital assets, but Kendra does not let him finish. The realization hits her with the force of a freight train. She realizes for the very first time that Todd did not just leverage her grandmother's stolen property deeds. He forged her signature on the fraudulent offshore loan documents to save his own skin. He legally bound her to a $2 million international wire fraud scheme, effectively making her a federal accessory to a massive financial crime. Kendra lets out a blood-curdling scream that stops the entire room dead in its tracks. She lunges across the corner of the table, her manicured fingers curling into claws as she physically attacks her husband. She strikes Todd across the face, her heavy diamond engagement ring catching his cheek and drawing a thin line of blood. "You set me up!" Kendra shrieks, completely losing her mind. She grabs the lapels of his custom suit, shaking him violently. "You forged my signature on federal bank documents. I am going to federal prison because of you. You told me the money was clean. You told me the investors were legitimate. You sacrificed me to save your pathetic, failing company." Todd shoves her backward with entirely too much force. Kendra stumbles her heels, catching on the thick Persian rug, and she crashes hard into the dining room wall, knocking a framed landscape painting to the floor. The glass shatters, a sharp crystalline explosion that perfectly mirrors the destruction of their marriage. Todd does not check to see if his wife is hurt. He frantically straightens his ruined suit jacket, his eyes darting wildly around the room as he searches for a lifeline. Finding none, he immediately turns on the only other person involved in the conspiracy. He looks directly at Valerie and throws her to the wolves without a single second of hesitation. "I did not orchestrate this," Todd shouts, pointing a shaking, accusatory finger at my mother. "Do not look at me. Look at her. Valerie is the one who authorized everything. She is the one who handed me the power of attorney documents. She explicitly told me the old woman was completely senile and would never know the money was gone." Valerie's jaw drops in sheer horror, the narcissistic injury hitting her so hard she physically recoils. Her own son-in-law, the man she enabled and protected at my expense for years, is currently offering her up on a silver platter to save himself. "You lying, pathetic coward," Valerie screams, her voice cracking with vicious venom. She steps around the table, pointing right back at Todd. "You came to me begging for capital. You told me your company was weeks away from insolvency. You promised me you would replace the funds before the federal auditors ever looked at the estate. The three villains stand in the wreckage of their Thanksgiving dinner, brutally tearing each other to shreds in front of the entire family. Every lie, every secret transaction, every ounce of calculated elder abuse is dragged out into the harsh light of day by their own desperate attempts to avoid federal prison. The perfect, untouchable alliance between the golden child, the golden son-in-law, and the manipulative matriarch dissolves into a spectacular, vicious bloodbath. They are giving me exactly what I wanted, destroying their own narrative without me having to say a single word. Aunt Celeste looks physically sick, pressing a napkin to her mouth, as she listens to Valerie admit to draining Nana's accounts. Cousin Marcus is frantically typing on his phone, likely warning the rest of the family to sever all financial ties with Todd immediately. Valerie suddenly realizes that her entire extended family is watching her confess to elder abuse. Panic washes over her face, replacing the anger. She frantically turns toward Marcus and Celeste, her eyes wide with desperate manipulation. She reaches out desperately, trying to pull the red folders out of their hands. "Do not read those," Valerie begs, her voice returning to that sickening high-pitched frequency she uses when she is lying. "Please, you have to understand, Maya is deeply unwell. She fabricated all of this. She printed these fake documents to destroy us because she is jealous. She has always been jealous of Kendra's success. None of this is real. You know me, Celeste. You know I would never hurt my own mother." I step forward, closing the distance between us. Gideon shifts slightly behind me, a silent, towering wall of tactical intimidation, ensuring no one takes a single step in my direction. I look at Valerie, watching the frantic, desperate lies spill from her mouth. I do not raise my voice, but the absolute coldness in my tone silences her instantly. I remind her of the math. I instruct the room to look at the bank routing numbers printed on page 4. I tell them to cross-reference the dates of the wire transfers from Nana's pension account, with the dates Kendra purchased her luxury vehicles and Valerie paid the initiation fees at the Buckhead Country Club. "Math does not lie, Valerie," I say, my voice ringing with total uncompromising authority. "Math is exact. Math is a documented, verifiable truth. Unlike your entire existence as a mother." Valerie stares at me, her mouth opening and closing silently. She has absolutely nothing left. The gaslighting, the manipulation, the constant suffocating rewriting of history that defined my entire childhood has been completely neutralized by hard, undeniable forensic data. She is exposed, laid bare in front of the audience she values above all else. Todd, however, is too arrogant to accept total defeat. The reality of the federal indictment has not fully penetrated his thick skull. He wipes a bead of sweat from his forehead and glares at me, his chest heaving as he desperately tries to reassert dominance. He straightens his posture, attempting to look down at me. "You think a stack of printed paper scares me?" Todd snarls, his voice dripping with venom and desperate bravado. "You are out of your mind, Maya. We are not some pathetic, helpless victims you can push around. We are incredibly wealthy. We have elite corporate defense attorneys on retainer. We will drag this out in federal court for a decade, until you are bankrupt with legal fees." He slams his hand down on the back of his dining chair, gesturing wildly around the opulent room. "Look around you," Todd shouts, his eyes wide and manic. "We live in a fortress. We have millions of dollars in equity locked into this estate alone. You cannot touch us here. We will liquidate this property tomorrow morning and bury you in litigation. You are nothing but a jealous, bitter accountant, and you will never, ever take this lifestyle away from us." I let his rant echo off the vaulted ceilings. I let the desperate, pathetic boasting hang in the air for a long, heavy moment. I look around the lavish dining room, taking in the crystal chandeliers, the imported silk drapes, and the custom mahogany furniture funded entirely by my grandmother's suffering. I smile. It is a slow, predatory expression that causes the remaining color to drain completely from Todd's face. I do not look at the red folders. Instead, I reach into my heavy leather tote bag. I bypass the forensic evidence and the federal indictments. I pull out a single crisp, beautifully printed legal document encased in a premium blue backing. It is not a federal file. It is a real estate contract freshly finalized and recorded by Elias's firm just hours ago. I hold the document up, ensuring the embossed state seal is clearly visible to everyone in the room. About this mansion, I say, my voice dropping to a conversational, almost pleasant tone. I look directly at Todd, watching his eyes lock onto the blue document. Remember that 30-day notice of foreclosure you received in the mail yesterday morning? I ask, tilting my head slightly. The one your bank sent after they realized the property deeds you used to secure your $2 million offshore bridge loan were entirely fraudulent. You told Kendra it was just a simple clerical error. You told her the bank made a processing mistake and your lawyers would clear it up by Monday. Todd stops breathing. His hands grip the back of the dining chair so hard his knuckles are white. It was not a bank error, Todd, I say, taking one step closer, delivering the absolute undeniable checkmate. Your primary lender panicked when the federal freeze hit your accounts. They immediately auctioned off your toxic debt to the highest bidder to mitigate their own legal exposure. I drop the blue document directly onto the center of the mahogany table, right over the spilled red wine. I bought your debt, I tell him, watching the reality of his total destruction finally shatter his mind. You do not own this house anymore. The Monday morning air in Atlanta is crisp and biting, carrying the distinct chill of inevitable consequences. I sit comfortably in the driver's seat of my rented SUV, parked discreetly at the very edge of the cul-de-sac. From this vantage point, I have an unobstructed panoramic view of the wrought iron gates guarding Todd and Kendra's sprawling mega mansion. I hold a steaming cup of dark roast coffee in my right hand, letting the heat warm my fingers as I watch the absolute destruction of a fraudulent empire unfold in real time. Exactly at 8 o'clock in the morning, a convoy of heavy utility vehicles turns onto the pristine suburban street. Two massive moving trucks rumble down the asphalt, followed immediately by three Fulton County Sheriff's Department cruisers. Their light bars are flashing a silent, relentless warning as they pull directly up to the property line. The heavy iron gates are already locked, but the lead sheriff steps out of his cruiser, walks up to the keypad, and slaps a heavily taped legal foreclosure notice directly over the security camera. A technician from the bank's asset recovery team expertly bypasses the electronic lock. The gates swing open, groaning under the weight of the legal mandate. The convoy rolls into the driveway, parking aggressively across the perfectly manicured landscaping. I take a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. The bitter taste is perfect. The heavy mahogany front doors of the mansion fly open before the sheriffs even reach the top of the stone steps. The chaos spills out onto the pristine driveway like a ruptured artery. Todd bursts through the doorway, clutching a cell phone so tightly to his ear that his knuckles are bone white. He is wearing the same wrinkled dress shirt from the night before, his hair disheveled and his face unshaven. He is pacing frantically across the imported stone pavers, screaming into the receiver. His voice carries easily across the manicured lawn, echoing with raw, unadulterated panic. He is shouting at an offshore account manager in the Cayman Islands, begging them to bypass the federal routing numbers. He demands they release an emergency wire transfer to cover his immediate legal retainers. I watch his chest heave as the voice on the other end of the line delivers the fatal blow. Every single corporate holding company, every shell entity, and every personal domestic account attached to his Social Security number is completely locked. The federal freeze I initiated on Thursday has metastasized. He is entirely financially paralyzed. He possesses zero liquid capital. Behind him, Valerie erupts from the house. My mother is entirely unrecognizable. The perfectly curated high society matriarch who hosted Thanksgiving dinner is gone. She is wearing a pair of wrinkled designer silk pajamas, her bare feet slapping against the cold stone steps. She is clutching her leather checkbook and a heavy gold Rolex watch, desperately waving them at the lead sheriff. Valerie practically throws herself in front of the moving crew, attempting to physically block them from entering the grand foyer. She begs the armed deputies for just a few more days. She attempts to hand the lead sheriff the gold watch, claiming she can write a certified check to cover the mortgage arrears right this second. She uses her most frantic, manipulative tone, insisting there has been a catastrophic bureaucratic mistake. The sheriff does not even blink. He politely but firmly instructs her to step aside, keeping his hand resting securely on his utility belt. He informs her that the property belongs to a private holding company as of Friday morning, and that she has exactly 45 minutes to collect her personal identification before the locks are permanently changed. The movers bypass her entirely, carrying out a massive, absurdly expensive velvet chaise lounge. I watch Valerie completely break down, weeping on the stone pillars of her former fortress. I lean back against the leather headrest of my SUV, feeling a profound, absolute stillness. I do not feel a single drop of empathy. I do not feel guilt. I only feel the perfect symmetrical weight of mathematical justice. I look at the designer silk pajamas clinging to my mother, and my mind flashes back exactly 14 years. It was a Tuesday morning, just as cold and biting as today. I was 18 years old, standing on the cracked concrete driveway of our old suburban house. I was shivering in a thin denim jacket, staring at a heavy black plastic garbage bag sitting on the ground next to my worn-out sneakers. That garbage bag contained 3 pairs of jeans, 4 t-shirts, and my freshly printed high school diploma. That was the entire sum of my existence under Valerie's roof. I had just turned 18, and my credit score was a pristine, untouched blank slate. Kendra, already drowning in massive credit card debt from her relentless shopping addictions, had picked out a $40,000 luxury sedan she absolutely could not afford. The dealership required a co-signer with perfect credit. Kendra demanded I sign my name to the predatory loan. When I looked my older sister in the eye and calmly refused, Valerie did not hesitate for a single second. My mother handed me the black garbage bag pointed directly at the street and delivered her ultimatum. She told me that if I refused to sacrifice my financial future to support my own blood, I did not deserve to sleep under her roof. She called me a selfish, ungrateful disappointment. She locked the deadbolt and watched through the living room blinds as I dragged that garbage bag down the sidewalk completely alone with absolutely nowhere to go. I take another sip of my coffee, the memory fading back into the recesses of my mind. Valerie kicked me out into the street to protect Kendra's reckless greed. Today I am foreclosing on her entire reality to protect the grandmother she discarded. The universe always balances its ledgers eventually. Down the driveway, the situation deteriorates further. Kendra finally stumbles out of the front doors carrying 2 massive Louis Vuitton suitcases. Her face is streaked with ruined mascara. She drops the suitcases on the driveway and immediately begins screaming at Todd. She points at the sheriffs, pointing at the moving trucks, demanding he fix the situation instantly. She wails about her social reputation, claiming she cannot be seen standing on the street like a common criminal. Todd ignores her entirely. He pockets his useless cell phone and stares wildly down the street, calculating his odds. He realizes the house is lost. He realizes the money is gone. He pivots sharply, sprinting toward the matte black G-Wagon parked near the garage. He bypasses his wife, leaving Kendra sobbing on the concrete, intending to flee the jurisdiction before the corporate lawyers can officially serve him. He grabs the heavy door handle of the SUV, yanking it open. Before Todd can even pull himself into the driver's seat, the atmosphere on the street shifts violently. 3 heavy, unmarked black SUVs turn sharply off the main suburban road. They do not follow the posted speed limit. They do not approach cautiously. Their tires squeal against the asphalt as they accelerate directly toward the open iron gates. They roar into the driveway, bypassing the moving trucks and the local sheriffs entirely. The lead black SUV swerves aggressively, cutting the wheel hard and slamming its reinforced bumper directly in front of the G-Wagon, completely boxing Todd in. The second and third vehicles fan out, creating an impenetrable perimeter across the front lawn. The heavy doors of the SUVs swing open simultaneously. 10 federal agents step out onto the driveway, moving with terrifying synchronized precision. They are wearing dark tactical vests with the letters FBI and IRSCI emblazoned across their chests in stark, high-visibility yellow. They do not carry clipboards. They do not look interested in negotiating. The lead federal agent, a tall, imposing woman with a steely expression, walks directly up the stone steps, bypassing the completely stunned local sheriffs. She pulls a thick stack of heavily stamped federal documents from her tactical vest. Todd freezes his hand, still clutching the door handle of the G-Wagon. Valerie stops weeping, her mouth dropping open in absolute sheer terror as she realizes this is not just an eviction. The lead agent projects her voice across the driveway, her words carrying the heavy, crushing weight of the United States government. Todd Blackwood and Valerie Davis, the agent, announces reading directly from the federal warrant. You are hereby placed under federal arrest for conspiracy to commit international wire fraud, tax evasion, and the financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Step away from the vehicle and place your hands clearly where we can see them. Kendra collapses onto her Louis Vuitton suitcases, letting out a shattered, hysterical scream as two armed agents immediately flank her husband. Todd does not fight. His knees buckle beneath him, his corporate arrogance completely evaporating as cold steel handcuffs are ratcheted tightly around his wrists. I place my empty coffee cup into the center console of my SUV. I shift the gear into drive, my foot resting lightly on the accelerator. I watch the federal agents march my mother and my brother-in-law toward the back of the unmarked vehicles. The red folders I delivered on Thanksgiving Day did their exact job. The evidence was irrefutable. The trap has officially snapped shut. I merge smoothly onto the main road, leaving the flashing lights and the shattered remnants of their fraudulent empire in my rearview mirror, driving back to Washington with absolute peace. I sit in my parked SUV at the very end of the mansion's long driveway, sipping the last lukewarm drops of my coffee. The morning air is sharp, and the scene unfolding in front of me is a masterpiece of inevitable consequence. A team of professional movers methodically carries heavy antique furniture out the front doors, stepping carefully around the chaos of the federal raid. Todd is currently pinned against the matte black hood of his prized G-Wagon. A federal agent secures heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists, while another thoroughly searches his pockets. Todd is frantically screaming over his shoulder, demanding a phone call, realizing with crushing absolute certainty that every single offshore and domestic account attached to his name is entirely frozen. He has no leverage, no capital, and no escape. A few yards away, Valerie is completely hysterical. She stands in her wrinkled designer silk pajamas, thrashing against the grip of a female IRS investigator. The agent calmly and methodically reads Valerie her Miranda rights, reciting the federal statutes for wire fraud and elder abuse. Valerie attempts to bribe the sheriff, sobbing wildly and offering them non-existent money to just look the other way. Kendra is left sitting directly on the hard concrete curb. She is surrounded by a pathetic barricade of Louis Vuitton and Chanel designer bags, hyperventilating into her hands. The golden child is finally realizing that she possesses absolutely nothing in her own name. The luxury vehicles, the mega mansion, the country club memberships, all of it was a fragile illusion built on stolen federal pensions. Valerie's frantic eyes suddenly dart down the driveway and lock onto my parked SUV. The sheer terror in her expression morphs into a desperate, calculating manipulation. She violently jerks her arm, breaking away from the federal agent for a fraction of a second, and sprints directly toward my vehicle. She slams her open palms against the passenger side window, pounding on the reinforced glass. Her face is streaked with ruined makeup and absolute panic. Maya. Please, she cries, her voice muffled but piercing through the glass. You have to stop this. Tell them it is a misunderstanding. We are blood. Maya, you cannot do this to your own mother. I reach out and press the button on the console, rolling the window down exactly 1 single inch. The cold morning air rushes in, carrying the scent of her expensive floral perfume and raw fear. I look directly into her sobbing face, feeling nothing but profound, absolute stillness. Blood does not leave its mother rotting in a soiled paper gown so it can sip margaritas in Cabo. I tell her, my voice flat and unyielding. The federal agents catch up to Valerie, grabbing her arms and pulling her firmly away from my vehicle. The investigators catalog the physical evidence seized from the property, placing Duyan Mao 1_14 into a heavy plastic evidence bag. They meticulously seal Duyan Mao Haigach, Dui Muy Bon, and Duyan Mao Bagach, Dui Muy Bon, immediately logging them into the federal chain of custody. Before the agents can secure Valerie in the back of the transport vehicle, Kendra scrambles up from the curb. She abandons her designer bags and runs up to my cracked window, weeping uncontrollably. The entitled arrogance she displayed her entire life has vanished entirely. She begs me for a loan, pleading for just enough cash to secure a cheap hotel room for the night, so she does not have to sleep on the street. I reach into my leather wallet. I bypass the platinum credit cards and pull out two crisp $100 bills. I fold them once and slip them through the narrow 1-inch gap, dropping them directly onto the asphalt at Kendra's feet. "Here is $200, I state, my voice carrying absolute finality. The exact amount Mom gave me when she threw me out at 18 with a garbage bag full of clothes. Make it stretch." I press the button and roll the window up, completely sealing off the sound of her frantic sobbing. I shift the SUV into drive and pull away from the sprawling estate, leaving the flashing lights, the moving trucks, and the complete destruction of their fraudulent empire in my rearview mirror. The scene transitions seamlessly, returning to the quiet, steady rhythm of my life in Washington, D.C. Several months have passed since the federal raid in Atlanta, and the air inside my spacious condo is warm and incredibly peaceful. The afternoon sun shines brightly through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the vibrant green leaves of my indoor plants. Nana is sitting comfortably in a plush, ergonomic armchair situated right in the center of the sunroom. She is wearing a beautiful, deep emerald silk robe, her silver hair freshly styled. The hollow, sunken look in her eyes is completely gone, replaced by a bright, sharp awareness. She looks healthier and more vibrant than she has in years, her cheeks carrying a warm, natural color. LaToya, the incredibly sharp, observant nurse, who originally handed me the flash drive that saved Nana's life, sits across from her at a small glass table. I hired LaToya as Nana's full-time private caregiver the exact moment the federal asset recovery funds were cleared. Right now, LaToya is laughing out loud, slapping a playing card down onto the glass surface as Nana triumphantly wins another round of gin rummy. I stand in the doorway of my home office holding a warm mug of tea, watching them with profound satisfaction. I turn and look at the wall directly above my desk. The small blue key from the Chicago safety deposit box is professionally mounted inside a sleek black shadow box frame. It hangs right in the center of the wall, a permanent, tangible reminder of the exact moment I stopped waiting for an apology and took complete control of my life. Surrounding the framed key are the finalized legal judgments and asset recovery confirmations neatly labeled Duyen Mao 1_15, Duyen Mao 2_15, and Duyen Mao 3_15. They represent absolute mathematical justice. I take a sip of my tea, reflecting on the journey of the past year. I did not just hire an attorney to extract my grandmother from a toxic facility. I systematically dismantled a fraudulent enterprise, reclaimed my own narrative, and completely shattered a generational curse of toxic favoritism that had suffocated me since childhood. I stopped seeking validation from people who were fundamentally incapable of offering it. I turned directly to the audience, looking straight ahead with absolute, unwavering clarity. They called me the family disappointment right up until the heavy steel handcuffs clicked around their wrists. Family isn't an undeniable blood obligation that requires you to sacrifice your sanity and your future. Family is who actually shows up for you when the money is gone, the prestige is stripped away, and you have absolutely nothing left to offer but the absolute truth. The profound lesson from these stories is that your worth is never defined by those who fail to see it, even blood relatives. True family is built on mutual respect, not toxic obligation or manipulation. When trapped in a cycle of favoritism and emotional abuse, the ultimate victory isn't vengeance. It is choosing yourself. By establishing firm boundaries and walking away, you reclaim the power to build an authentic, successful life, surrounded by people who genuinely value you. Have you ever had to walk away from toxic relatives to protect your peace? Share your journey below, and please subscribe.